Hello chess fans, I'm back with another opening repertoire video, this time from the white side, and we're doing a tricky and unorthodox opening repertoire. So one thing to note about this repertoire I'm going to recommend you is in no circumstances is white ever worse from the opening. So at worst it's going to be equal while allowing for a lot of tricks against every single line. So I feel like this is a highly venomous opening repertoire that a lot of you are going to want to switch to, and with that all said, I'm going to just jump in right away. So I'm going to start against the French because I feel like you can be trickiest against the French. So obviously I'm going to recommend e4 because e4 is just the most aggressive and the most tricky, to be honest. And now here a lot of people recommend the two knights as the most tricky one, but I don't feel like it's very practical, and I feel the move queen e2 is a lot more tricky. So now a lot of your opponents, so let's just start with basically what's the best responses by your opponents. So probably the best response by your opponents, which not a lot of your opponents are going to play, is c5. And against this, there's again a lot of moves. Now, if your opponent has seen this move before, queen e2 before, they're going to play c5. But here, again, we're going to shock them and play b3. At this point, none of your opponents will know what is going on, and white is not even worse here. The position is just equal. So now, to give a sample line, the most natural move here is knight c6, bishop b2. And here, what should white do? For example, if they go for a move like d6, we can go for f4, something like this, and we just have a fluid attacking setup. Not to mention, after this, you can at worst just take here. And after takes here, you just have a fluid attacking setup. But this might be better because after knight d5, knight takes f4, white is actually significantly better here, believe it or not. So that was just a sample line. Now, the best move here would be e5. But then after knight c3, you actually have some squares in the center to work with, though your bishop is blocked. You can castle queenside. And now the final thing they could do is play a move like knight f6. And after this, you're just going to play knight f3, if d6, d4. And we play like a sort of open Sicilian position where it's very strange. You're probably going to get a Maroczy bind, and well, this is the fresh type of position we're looking for. Now, c5 is the best move. b3 is probably about equal, but it's about as tricky as we can get. Now, another move is e5. e5 is very tricky because a lot of people won't expect e6 and then e5, but after queen e2, it's one of the best moves. Now, here I recommend the move f4, and the reason why is because after the move takes, we no longer, not knight f3, sorry. After the move d4, we no longer have to worry about this queen h4 check, because if queen h4 check, we have king d1. And I know this doesn't look like it's for the faint of heart, but believe it or not, again, white is equal. White has all of the center. White has going to get these pieces out with tempo. And the queen on e2, we had the extra tempo, allows us to get our king a little bit safer. And the other line, our king would have to go to d2 or to e2, which wouldn't be ideal, blocking our bishops. So here, white is equal, and I pretty much prefer white by a lot here because it's very tricky. Something like this might come to win the f4 pawn, and yeah, black is not going to be having fun here, especially if you know the position better than them. So the actual best move is not to take, unfortunately, for black. It's supposed to go d6 here, and after the move, knight f3, knight c6. Again, I'm going to shock you here. Now, you don't have to know any of this. At this point, the position is relatively equal. You can play like d6, g3, and okay, you have an equal position, but b3. None of your opponents will know this is happening, and the engine says, again, it's equal. I've included the analysis bar on the side, and that's just to show you this position is equal. Now, I put it to a higher depth, and at the highest depths, the engines are saying this position is probably about equal or maybe slightly better for black. So after this, white has full compensation with the move knight c3, knight d5 coming, and it's very hard to develop for black. You can also think about this. Okay, so that's the main lines. Now, here's where the fun comes in. After queen e2, your opponent doesn't have to play the best moves. d5 is way too common in terms of blitz because everyone just pre-moves it, but after takes, knight c6, white is just significantly better because they're playing a good version of the Scandinavian. You've blocked in your bishop. Why? I have no idea. So after queen d8, something like g3, and after this, we're just playing a Scandinavian at tempo up. The reason we go g3 is because we moved our queen already, so after bishop g2, the bishop has a hard time developing. For example, here, a lot of players play knight f6, and after bishop g2, I mean, they want to develop their bishop, so they would play like c6. And it's just unpleasant now. The bishop is just trapped. So that's probably what they're going to do. And if queen a5, d4, you're pretty much playing a good Scandinavian. Queen e2 is not that much of a hindrance, because now you can go bishop d2 here, and castle at queenside in one move. So yeah, after that, you'd be significantly better. A lot of people will play this common move, bishop e7, which is another one of the best moves. Here, I'm going to recommend we go for, to avoid theory, we're going to go for d3, and after d5, we're going to go for this move e5. And we're not trying to get a Qe, because if we play a move like knight f6, knight f3, knight f6, and now e5, we're transposing to a Qe, and we don't want to play a main line. So after e5, they don't have this knight f6 move. For example, if c5, knight f3, knight c6, g3, and yeah, here we're slightly, it's pretty much equal. Now the engine says g5 somehow gives black an advantage, but then after h3 it says equality. So the engine doesn't know how to make up its mind here. The most common move in human play here is h5, which, okay, I mean, if your opponent's playing h5 in the middle of nowhere, we should be happy. We want to get out of theory. And so yeah, this would be up, and f6 is another move. And after this, white is significantly better, not significantly, slightly better here. And yeah, we just have a pretty much unknown position. The whole idea of e5 is now this knight has a hard time developing, and that's why I think it's also a good option. So next, let's go to the Sicilian. After e4, c5, there's a lot of tricky variations against the Sicilian, like a3, like b4, like c3, like d4, the Smith-Morra, like f4, like knight c3. There's so many options. I'm going to recommend the b3 Snyder variation, which is maybe like a very common point in this repertoire. So now the most common move is to play knight c6. Now against e6, e6 is also a very common move. You can stick to what I've already pretty much taught you. Queen e2 would transpose to our line against the French. Maybe not as ideal here because we don't really need to play queen e2 because they weren't threatening d5. After e6, bishop e2 might offer us actually an advantage here. It's no longer even a dubious line after knight c6 here. d3, we're going to play d4, and after takes, we have this Maroczy bind setup. White is slightly better here. And after a move like d5, which is the only equalizing move, takes, knight f3, something like this, and we're going to play for d4 takes here, and we're going to have the IQP. They're a little bit down in development too, so it might be slightly unpleasant for them. So that's what to do against e6. Now, a lot of your opponents won't do that. At this point, knight c6 might be a better move. So we're just going to continue bishop e2, fianchettoing. And here they have a few options. So against d6, that's going to transpose to a position we're going to see later. And so, yeah, they don't really have any other options. e6 would also transpose. We can do that same thing, knight f3 and d4. Knight f6 would run into e5. So they have to play e5 here. And after bishop c4, which I recommend to control the d5 square, they're going to go for knight f6, and here we're going to go for knight c3. And here they have a few options. Now, if they go for a move like d6, we can go knight g2 f4, and yeah, I already aired that out. It's pretty much a nice position for us. If they go for a move, like instead of knight f6, if they go for like d6, we can go for f4 immediately, and after takes, there's actually no way to defend this pawn. Now, you don't have to remember this, just know that white is pretty much equal here. I apologize, I have a little bit of watery eye now, maybe allergies. So knight f6, knight c3, and here they play with the move d6, and I already went over that, sorry. Here they could also play d6, and yeah, sorry, the final move they have is a center fork trick with something like this, but after this, white is actually just slightly better because they have a lot of pressure on the center. Notice that these pieces are all coming at the center. White's a little bit better here. So that's what to do on knight c6. Now on d6, you can go bishop e2, and after knight c6, go knight c3. Now, if they go g6 too quickly, this is actually a mistake because after this, they're just going to get a bad pawn structure. And here, you just need to be careful, defend like this, and white should be a little bit better here. Now, if they don't do that, if they instead went for knight f6 and knight c6, we play f4. And again, if g6, we're going to go for knight d5. And if the move, or if after d6, bishop g2, knight f6, knight c3, knight c3, knight c6, they go knight c6, we're going to go for the move here, we're going to go for f4. Yeah. And again, if g6, knight d5 is maybe offering us advantage. And the other idea is, like if they do another move, like a move like a6, we can go for knight f3 and look for d4. And here we just have a bigger center. So that's what to do against the knight c6 type of variations. Now d6 isn't the best move. The final move I'm going to go over, like every other move gives white an advantage. Like if they do some random stuff, white's just going to get a big advantage. g3 is another seemingly equalizing move. Here we're going to go bishop b2, and they have to go knight f6 to block this. Now a lot of people might take here. I don't really like taking there, so what here I recommend is the move f4, and this is sure to take your opponent out of all theory that they would possibly know, because the main line here is e5, knight c6, knight d5 is also playable, but I think that black is slightly better there. But f4 is the only move I found that equalizes pretty much easily. Now if bishop g7, you have the move queen f3, and the idea is we want to play e5, and we're just waiting for what black might do. Now if knight c6, e5, something like knight g8, this is obviously not that pleasant for black. For example, knight a3, knight here should be able to defend this and the bishop pretty well, and that would be about equal. And if they go for like a d6, we can go for bishop b5 and trade this piece here, and it just seems like we have a pleasant position because their pieces are stuck, their knight can't move, and yeah, white would pretty much be doing very well here. Okay, so that's what to do against the whole Snyder Sicilian. So next, let's go into my recommendation versus e5. So I'm recommending e4, e5, obviously. And here, I mean, the main move by far is knight f3. Bishop c4 is also playable. Knight c3 is playable. f4 is playable. d4 is playable. And now you might have said, you literally gave all the moves. What are you going to recommend? Some crazy move like a3? Now, okay, I know what you're thinking. It looks like nothing. It looks like absolutely nothing. But I have lost to this a few times on the black side before I learned what you're supposed to do, and it's very, very, very tricky. So let me just start off with the tricky variation. So after a3, the move knight c6 can still lead to some tricky variations, but first let's go over knight f6. So here we're going to go knight c3, and it looks like we're just down a tempo. But the Scotch is actually not good against this line, because after takes, we have this crazy move, which I love, which is queen h5. And now the reason why this works in this specific position is because for white, this would be dubious if black could play the move knight b4, and after it takes bishop e7, it would go into a very dubious line. But here, black does not have knight b4. So black would have to play a move like knight c6. Now, this would pretty much transpose if you play knight f3, but you could also go for the move knight e4, which wins a pawn for white, but not cleanly. For example, something like this, and they can't take because this is pinned, and they would be losing a pawn here, but they would get compensation. But instead, after knight c6, bishop b5 here, this would be the main line. And yeah, white is about equal here, but it's hyper tricky. For example, if they play a move like takes here, after takes here, they have no way to defend this pawn. So yeah, or sorry, we would take this way. Yeah, they have no way to defend the pawn, and yeah, we'd just be winning a pawn. So after they take, we're actually going to take here, sorry. And after something like this, you don't have to memorize this too well, but just notice this is just a sample line. This is the best that black can do, and it's objectively a draw, but okay, only white can win this. And if they make any other moves, like, it's going to be very unpleasant for them. We don't need to go into too much of the nitty-gritty. This is going to surprise your opponent already. So this is another sample line. And here, black would be equal, but white is doing well there too. And yeah, this is the final line. And now if they go a6, which a lot of people are going to be like, okay, I'll just match it with a6, we actually get a dream Scotch position. Because notice here, usually in the 4-knight Scotch, they have bishop b4. But now here they don't. After takes, white is pretty much living the dream here. They have a Sicilian, except black traded an e-pawn. And if you know anything about the Sicilian, one of the reasons it's good is because the c-pawn is less valuable than the d-pawn. So black will win in any endgame, but here black doesn't even have the ability to go for an endgame. Excuse me. So now let's go over knight c6. Here we're going to go knight f3. And after knight f3, notice that if they play the move g6, we're going to go for this line. And it's basically as if white did this, and we played the refutation line, which is this. And now the idea is we're going to go for d3, and you can go for bishop e3, or you can immediately go for h4, which I think is highly interesting. Or you can play against the bishop, play h3. A lot of variations here. White is actually just slightly better here because the fianchetto is not ideal. Now, if f5, d4 is actually a lot better for white now here. Usually it's equal as black, but this a3 move, I'm not entirely sure what it does, but after this, black is just losing for some reason. Notice that the move here, now we have this move, and they don't have bishop b4 because now we're threatening this knight d5 move, and after knight takes e5, something like this is a lot better for white. White would be winning there. So if they don't have that bishop b4 option after takes, they can't go queen f6, which is the only line that's respected here, and the other lines are just bad. So yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can search up the Vienna Gambit, and that was the reverse Vienna Gambit with a3, and you'd see the main lines there. So after knight c6, knight c3, we're in the 4-knight Scotch with a3, which is another respected line. It's about equal. Now, if they go for bishop e7, now we have d4 takes, and it's kind of like if they played the a6 move, we get our ideal center. Now, if bishop c5, we have the center fork trick, and here, white would be pretty much winning. After bishop d6, just make sure you don't take here. It doesn't really give us much of an advantage. Here, we now have the special move f4, and only do this in this position. I know it's hard to remember, but something like this. And the whole idea of this position is after d5, we're going to get a huge space advantage. Okay, so that was where the tricky variations, where white is a little bit better in winning. But black can equal it. So after knight f6, we have to play knight c3 defending. Now, bishop c5 is the best way to equalize, in my opinion, because black doesn't have to know anything. After knight f3, something like this. Yeah, d6. Now here I recommend d4 just to keep out of theory. And one of the reasons that this would be bad is because they have options of bishop b4. Like, for example, if black played this and the pawn was back here, bishop b4 might be very problematic. But this position is about equal and not too clear. Now, after knight f3, d6, you can also just decide to play a regular Italian with here, and they go knight c6. But, I mean, that is just clearly equal, so I recommend going for some imbalances with this d4 move. After knight c6, this black has to low a lot more after knight f3, d5. Here, you can go for takes, and then you just have a 4-knight scotch as white. a3 doesn't really do much for you there. So, bishop b5 is a hyper tricky variation, and it's based on the fact that they don't have this move. So now here, if they go for d4, bishop e2, white's a significant amount better here because of the fact that they have less space, but they have basically compensation in the fact that their structure is a lot more solid, and it's easier for them to do pawn breaks with c3 and d3 and f4 and whatever. Now if takes, knight takes c5 is just a lot better for white would be winning. But so here they would have to go for knight takes e4, which is the only move here. Now here there's two moves. Now you can go for here, and it's about equal after something like this. And yeah, this is just no risk. You just go into a drawn endgame after takes, and yeah, we're in a drawn endgame. It's about equal here. But instead of that, you can go for this knight takes c5 move, which is super tricky, and it's also aligned as black. But it might be slightly worse for white in the end. They might be losing. And this is just the refutation of it. Now, a lot of your opponents might go here, and after d4, it's just slightly better for you. Or, for example, queen f6, and you can go back, and they're supposed to repeat, but you could also just do something else. Or sorry, if they go back, sorry, if when you go back, sorry, you're just up a pawn. So, or you're not up a pawn, but you've taken that pawn up the board, and this is supposed to be a gambit. So the main line would be queen g5, and after knight takes something like this. You can pause the video to try to keep up with this. And now here we play knight takes d5, and it's using the fact that, again, they don't have this bishop b4 move, and they don't have a knight coming to b4 in the future. A takes. It's very crazy, so you might want to pause it to take some time. And here, really, usually, black would be doing really well. And, for example, in the Lead Chess database, in the Masters database here, one of the only moves is the move queen e2. But then after the move bishop c5 is hyper accurate. A move like d4, bishop takes d4. Apparently, white has an advantage after a4. I mean, very hard to believe. And here, yeah, black would have to know a ridiculous line, bishop e6, to keep an advantage. Here, takes, and a move like takes here. And after bishop c4, king e1, bishop takes f1, takes, and takes here. Black is very slightly better. Now, which black opponent will know that? Absolutely none. I have no idea why black is even slightly better here. It looks completely equal to me. Material is equal. It's just we are lacking on development here. So you could go for that, or that's what usually is played in master games. Here, c4 in amateur games on Lead Chess is a huge win rate. For example, after the move, like here, the most played move is bishop c5, but then after c takes b5, black is just losing. So yeah, inexplicable. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that line. Pause, go back if you want. I also offer alternatives, and you can check the study in the description below. I also offer this gambit versus the French. Now let me just move that closer to the French. Okay, next we're going to go over to Caro-Kann, which is the fourth most popular option they have, and I know I'm going through a lot, so pause the video, run it back if you want to see more of it. So the Caro-Kann goes with c6. Now I'm going to play knight f3, and after d5, takes, you have to play the move knight e5. And I know they don't say move the same piece twice in the opening. This is the exception because black's diagonal here is just way too weak. Now the best move for black, and I think if you're playing this as black, you play the Caro-Kann as black, I highly recommend the move a6. a6 is just destroying all of black's plans to white's plans pretty much to go here, and it's not really that pleasant. After the move here, we're going to go for this type of position. And yeah, at any point, if black ever takes you, don't be worried as white because they have a hard time developing this bishop. So here we're going to go c4. Now here they have a few moves. If knight f6, you can go for this. And just the second that they play e6, just remember now we can play c5. Because now they don't get e5 in one move. Now if bishop f5, queen a4, and something like this, we play c5 the second we see e6. Here white would be again slightly better. Now if they take, don't be worried. For example, the only played move here in the master database is e6, but then after takes, white just enters a better endgame, so they shouldn't do that. Something like this might happen, and after bishop f3, white is just a little bit better. So another move they can play is e6, and here just take, go knight c6, and the second we see a move like knight f6 or something, play c5, and we are slightly better. And if g6, I just thought after bishop f4, the engine says it's equal. I don't really like this. As you can see, for black, all their pawns are on light squares. Their bishop is stuck. I would hate to play this position as black, and thus I prefer white a lot more than the engine says. So after knight c6, that's if they play a6, which is the best move. Not as common, but knight c6 is also playable. Now here after d4, don't be ever scared of the move knight takes e5, because after it takes here, again, sorry, I drew the wrong one. Yeah, if they ever go for something like bishop f4, we can punish them. So, or sorry, bishop f5, we can punish them. So don't worry about them playing that move. A lot of people are scared of this type of position, and this is a really highly played move on Lichess, even though it's a bad one. So now here, one of the most popular moves is knight f6. And here, I'm not going to recommend any of the main lines. So if your opponent plays knight f6 and knight c6, they probably know what they're doing. I'm going to recommend you play bishop f4, which is a really unknown move. Now, if queen b6, we transpose to a Jobava London line, which is actually just not good for black. Knight c6 looks to go knight b5, so here they have to prevent knight b5 with a6, and after takes, and the move bishop d3. Here our position is very pleasant. If they go here, they block their bishop, and their queen's a little bit misplaced, so we'd be slightly better. And if bishop g4 getting out, something like this, we have some kingside expansion, and they really have nothing to stay for that. They have no compensation for our expansion, and we'd be slightly better there. Okay, I know I'm going really fast, but pause the video, take your time if you want to go over this. Now, bishop f5 is always pretty much a bad move because of this. And after rook c8, we can go c3. Just remember, we can't really do much. If they go e6, they're in real big trouble because of the move takes in here. And I actually saw a game that went like a6, takes, and the rook was pretty much trapped. Because if you go rook a8 here, would win way too much material to count. So that's another tricky variation. Now, e6 is the best move here, but it blocks the bishop. Simple position. You can play c3 and just play this position. Okay, we have the bishop is blocked. It's slightly pleasant for us. Or you can go for, oops, sorry. After e6, you can also go for this and just take the free bishop pair. They could also go for e6 here, which is even more accurate because now they're actually threatening to take because then you don't get the tempo on the knight. And then after bishop d3, it's maybe not as pleasant. It is still pleasant. But we generally don't want to trade pieces if we are up in space. So here we'd have to go for bishop b5 and bishop d7. Notice if they go queen c7, bishop f4 is actually just trouble for them. Bishop d6, queen g4, and they have trouble here. So white would be quite a bit better here. Instead of that, they should go for bishop d7, and after takes. Any move here is pretty much probably equal for white. But I would argue white is slightly better here in human play because they have the double bishops, the bishop pair, sorry. Okay, so that's the Apocalypse attack. Now, I highly recommend the two knights attack. But the reason I couldn't recommend it in this repertoire is, first off, it's a little bit too mainliney. Like, many people know what to do in the Caro-Kann in this, and even up to like 1800 Lichess, they know what they're pretty much doing. What's most recommended is this, and I mean, it's hard to really get tricks in this. Okay, white's slightly better, but like, I can't really tell you much more than this because, okay, our knight's on f2, and if queen e2, I mean, we only have this one trick. This is our one trick, and other than that, it's just pretty equal, something like this. And there's a lot of moves here that equalize for black. Not equalize, but at least white doesn't have as much of an advantage as in other variations. So yeah, I would love to recommend this, and it's a more serious repertoire choice. But yeah, I highly recommend you check this one out as well. Okay, finally on to the Pirc and Philidor. I'm literally going to do this in one line. And the line I recommend, something like this. Black can pretty much do anything. We're going to just play h3, bishop g7, and g4. And this is the idea. Bishop g2, knight e2, bishop e3, and the f-pawn marches up the board. We have the attack. We have more space. We just have an improved version of their position because we have a fianchetto, and we have more space. And the reason we can get away with this g4 and stuff is because they're doing nothing in the center. So if your opponent doesn't do anything in the center, you can afford to go on the side. And this is going to be the plan. And yeah, this is a sample line that might occur, and yeah, white's a significant amount better here because of the fact that, okay, we have this pawn in the center, we have more space on the king side, and yeah, white does good here in the Lichess database. So that's just simple there. And if they go for a move like e5, we're going to go for knight g2, bishop e7, h3, and we're looking for the exact same thing if castle is g4, and yeah, white's just better here. Now, most players will play h5 to stop you. Here, just play g3, continue with the same thing again, and make sure you always prevent b5 in these sorts of positions from black, because that's how they get counterplay with b5, b4. So that's all you have to remember. If knight b2, it's even better because you have g4. I had a video on my channel about this, h6 and h3, and it's like we have the ideal version of the last position, except they would never play h6. Notice if they play e5 now after g5, they're completely lost because they have to go back, and yeah, this is just lost for black. So yeah, that's pretty much the Pirc and the Philidor. Now let me just look at some other moves. After e4, they can play the move knight c6. Against this, I recommend f4. I'm just going to go over this quickly. If the move d5 here just a little bit better. You can pause if you want to see more. If the move e5, you can go knight f3. And yeah, you can look at the study down below if you want to know more. If takes, just know after takes, they're in a dubious line, because if f4, we have the move d5, which we didn't have previously. And if they move back, okay, we're just taking a free pawn. So they'd have to go here, and something like this. White is just having a much better pawn structure. Okay, so they could also go for f5, which is a Miles Gambit. Just remember this. I mean, I'm not going to go too seriously over the move e5, and I already covered the move d5. If here, d4, we have just more space, and this is a crazy position. You can look at it yourself. Knight f6, here. I'm going to recommend c4, knight b6, knight f3 now. So this is a very unpopular line already. There's 2 games in the Masters database after d6. We're going to take, and if they take this way, we have a better version of this line because they already put their knight here. Now, it's more so said that knight f6 is a better move here because the knight is just better on the king side, and you're not going to get any counterplay on the queen side here because white's just going to castle queen side, so the knight is actually just misplaced here. Notice that, for example, if we played the move if we played the main line, which is to go something like this, and now knight f3, yeah, they could have more lines. I'm trying to remember exactly what I'm looking for. Oh yeah, after takes, now c4. This was a line recommended in a book, but here knight f6 would be a slightly better option for black. But after takes, here we just don't give them that option. And if they take with a c pawn, you can go for the move b3, which is highly interesting, playing against a g6 pawn. And yeah, after something like knight c6, bishop b2 is slightly better for white, probably. You can also go for d4, d5 quickly. Now, if bishop g4, you can go for bishop b2 again, and it's just better. And if you want to go for like a more like mainline approach, you can go for h6, g4, and d4. And yeah, we're back in a main line, except we kind of like tried to trick black along the way. So I guess you can be happy with that. Against d5, I'm going to recommend that you take. And after the move knight f6, I can't really help you here because there's just no really tricky lines without knowing a ton of theory, which I tried to avoid. So I would just recommend doing this, play c4, and do something similar to what I'm recommending against queen f6. Queen takes d5, sorry. So queen takes d5, I recommend knight f3. And now bishop g4 is the most critical line. A lot of your opponents are going to do something silly like play knight f6 here and then play the move like c6, like bishop g4, bishop e2, and c6, and they're just looking for some like Scandinavian setup. But after this, white's just slightly better. Look for bishop e3, a3, b4 ideas, castles, bring the rooks to the center, queen d2, rook d1, rook c1. I mean, this is just what we're going to do, and then try to break in the center or break on the queen side depending on what is better. After d4, something like this. Again, we're going to win the bishop pair like this with h3, and notice they can't take here because there's this famous tactic. Okay, so that was, I skipped ahead a little bit there, but after bishop g2, we're going to play bishop e2, and after knight c6, h3, and we're just wanting to win the bishop pair. Now, the move d4 is actually just a little bit equal because they have this move queen f5, and now you're going to see the point of h3 in a second, because if they go bishop h5, follow that same line, they no longer can play here, because then we have the move g4. So this is just a winning line for white now, because after, let's just give a sample line, something like this, and yeah, black just moved all their pieces back. That was the engine line actually, and black is completely losing here. It's +3. So instead of that, after the move bishop g4, bishop e2, h3, they have to take. And this is just sad for most players with black. They don't want to trade this early, and yeah, here they actually just have to trade queens. So definitely Scandinavian players will not be happy at seeing this. So I mean, yeah, do what you will with this and upset the Scandinavian players. So yeah, I finally finished all of that. I apologize for this video being as long as it probably is. I think it's upwards of 30 minutes, but an entire repertoire has to be comprehensive. I tried to go over as much things I can, as much preparation that you can have to be happy in your own games. Now, I have played a lot of these. I think the things I have the most experience with are my alternative mentions, the things like the Scandinavian, the stuff I recommend against that, the stuff I recommend in the Pirc and Philidor. I've played that in many videos. Now, what I don't know as well is I don't know the lines against the French as well, but I've tried them all out and I've gotten playable positions. My win rate is around 50%, which is not great, but it's pretty much fine. And the Snyder Sicilian, I don't have much experience, but I have seen it from the black side fairly often. The Mengarini, I've also seen from the black side a fair few times. Now, at my level, it doesn't really give much of an advantage, but at the lower level, it is highly tricky. I highly recommend it. The Apocalypse, I mainly play the 2 Knights, which I recommend switching to once you hit maybe like 2300, 2200 online. And yeah, that's the entire repertoire. So if you want to see this type of repertoire for the black pieces, which I think is also probably going to be harder to do because there's no like equality that you can get as black easily while playing tricky. But if you want to see this type of lines from black, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and tell me down below you got all the way to the end and wanted to see that black video. So with that all said and done, I will see you guys in the next one. Also, just in case you stayed, I am actually not home right now. And this video is actually pre-recorded from 3 weeks ago. So you might notice some like different things in the world right now. I don't know. It's round 12 of the candidates. That's all I'm going to say for now. I'll see you guys in the next one.